When will that old man finally die? My son texted me mistakenly instead of his wife. I was sitting alone in my dimly lit living room when the notification chimed softly from my phone. At first, I didn't even look at the screen. I thought it was another reminder for my medication, or maybe a weather alert for the cold night ahead. But something, maybe instinct, maybe the strange heaviness in the air, urged me to pick it up. And the moment my eyes landed on the message, my chest tightened as if someone had quietly pressed a hand into it. I blinked twice, thinking my old eyes were playing tricks on me. But the words didn't change. The sentence sat there raw, unfiltered, cruel like a knife lying openly on a kitchen counter. When will that old man finally die? For a moment, everything around me went silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, even the passing cars outside, everything disappeared. My mind drifted somewhere else, somewhere far away, replaying years of memories I had spent building, sacrificing, and giving. Every birthday I had saved money to make special. Every school project I stayed up late helping him finish. Every scraped knee I bandaged. Every mistake he made that I forgave without hesitation. My boy, my only son. The child I carried on my shoulders at the county fair. The young man whose graduation I clapped for the loudest. The groom I hugged tightly on his wedding day. Smiling even though I stood quietly in the back. Unnoticed. And now those hands, the ones that once held mine as he learned to walk. Type those words about me. I read the message again, hoping to find a typo, some alternate meaning. Anything that would soften the blow. But no. It was clear, direct, filled with a kind of frustration and disgust that I had never imagined he held inside him. And then, just below the message, I saw the second part, the part that told me the message wasn't meant for me. Ooh, I'm sick of him. He's useless now. What's the point of keeping him around? My lips trembled. The phone felt heavier in my hand. Slowly, I set it down on the table beside me, not because I wanted to, but because my fingers suddenly felt cold and weak. My eyes stung. I tried to swallow the lump forming in my throat, but it wouldn't go down. It sat there, burning, suffocating. I leaned back on the old sofa, staring at the ceiling. The house seemed larger somehow, emptier, as if the walls themselves had backed away from me. The loneliness I always tried to ignore suddenly became louder, filling every corner of the room. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I imagined my late wife sitting beside me the way she used to, gently placing her hand over mine. She would have known what to say. She always did. She used to tell me, people forget the hands that raised them when they get too busy trying to climb higher. But this was something she never prepared me for. My phone buzzed again. A new message. Dad. That text wasn't for you. I stared at the screen. I could almost see his embarrassment bleeding through the words, but there was no apology. No guilt, no remorse. Just fear that he had been caught saying what he truly felt. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't know what to say. What does a father say when his own son is waiting for him to die? How do you respond to something like that? My breathing grew shallow, my chest rising and falling unevenly. My warm, gentle eyes that had watched over him his entire life, blurred as tears slowly gathered in them. I wanted to call him, ask him why, ask him what I did wrong. But I knew the answer before I even thought the question. I didn't earn this cruelty. I didn't deserve this bitterness. This wasn't about something I did. This was about convenience. I had simply become a burden in his eyes, a disposable burden. I stood up slowly, my joints aching from age, but it wasn't the physical pain that made my movements heavy, it was the weight pressing down on my heart. I walked toward the small kitchen, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hands trembled so much it almost spilled. I placed the glass down before it shattered on the floor. I didn't feel anger. Not yet, just shock. A deep, aching shock that spread through my chest like cold water. My reflection in the kitchen window caught my eye. I saw the man I had become, gray hair neatly combed back, face clean shaven, wrinkles etched gently across my skin like soft lines of time. I didn't see an old man. I saw someone who had lived. Someone who had loved. Someone who had given everything. So why wasn't that enough? Outside, the wind rustled softly against the house, but inside, everything remained painfully still. I went back to the living room, picked up my phone, and quietly placed it face down on the table. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not yet. All I knew was this. Nothing would be the same after tonight. And in exactly 40 minutes, everything would change in a way my son never expected. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. I sat in my old armchair with the lamp dimmed low beside me, staring at the wall while the message from my son repeated in my mind like an echo I couldn't silence. The house felt colder as the hours passed. The kind of cold that settles into your bones, not just your skin. I wrapped the old blanket tighter around my shoulders, the one my wife sewed years ago. But even that couldn't warm the ache inside me. I kept replaying memories of my son, his first words, his first steps, the way he used to run toward me when he scraped his knee, crying and calling Dad, as if I was the safest place in the world. And now the same child, my child, was quietly wishing for the day I would be gone, wishing for the day he wouldn't have to look at me, take care of me, think about me. That realization carved deeper than any knife. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, my phone vibrated again. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I knew who it was. He had sent 4 messages already. Probably trying to soften his words, trying to twist them into something they weren't. I didn't look. I didn't want to see another excuse. Around 4 a.m., I got up from the chair and walked slowly to the kitchen. My knees cracked with each step, a reminder of age but not weakness. I brewed a pot of coffee, listening to the quiet sputter as it dripped into the pot. The smell filled the small kitchen, warm and familiar. But even the strongest coffee couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. I stood at the counter, hands wrapped around the mug, staring at the dark liquid. My reflection floated faintly in the kitchen window again, clean-shaven, hair neatly combed, tired eyes that still carried gentleness even through the hurt. My wife always said my eyes held too much softness for this world. Maybe she was right. I took a slow sip and listened as the house creaked with age. It was strange how loud silence could be. The kind of silence that forces you to think about everything you've ignored, everything you've forgiven just to keep the peace. At 6:12 a.m., right as the horizon began to lighten outside, my phone rang. It was him. My son. His name flashed across the screen. And for a moment, I felt my hand tighten, not in anger, but in trembling disbelief. How do you speak to someone who wants you gone? How do you talk to a man who looks at you and sees a burden? I let it ring until it stopped. He called again. And again. On the 4th call, I finally picked it up, but I didn't say a word. I held the phone to my ear and listened to his breathing, fast, restless, unsure. Dad, you saw the message, right? He finally asked. His voice was small, nervous, and just maybe afraid. I didn't answer. Dad, I didn't mean it like that, he continued quickly. You know how things are. You know how stressed I've been. It just came out wrong. Still, I stayed silent. He sighed on the other end, long and frustrated. I could almost hear him rubbing his forehead, the way he did when he was annoyed as a teen. You can't take everything so seriously, he said. I mean, everyone gets tired sometimes. You know that. His excuses spilled out one after another, a stream of words meant to cover the truth, but only revealing it more clearly. He wasn't sorry for what he said. He was sorry he got caught. There's a difference, and I felt that difference like a bruise spreading slowly across the heart. Finally, he added, Look, Dad, it's just, Me and my wife, we're trying to build our own life. It's hard taking care of everything. Maybe you could be a little more independent, you know. I mean, you're not helpless. Independent. The word tasted bitter. My voice finally broke through the silence. I've been independent all my life, I said calmly. I raised you. I worked 2 jobs. I survived things you never even heard about. I never asked for anything. Not until age forced my body to slow down. He didn't say anything. And even then, I continued slowly, I never expected you to take care of me. I only expected respect. Not love, not comfort. Just respect. He swallowed hard on the other side. Dad, come on. You're overreacting. I closed my eyes. That one sentence told me everything I needed to know. I'm coming over later, he said abruptly. We need to talk. And don't make this bigger than it is, okay? I'll explain. The call ended. The house fell silent again. I walked to the living room and sat down slowly. I laced my fingers together and stared ahead. My breathing was steady now, not shaky or broken. There is a moment after the deepest kind of hurt, where sorrow slowly curls into something else, not anger. Not vengeance, but clarity. And in that clarity, I remembered something I had forgotten for years. A piece of paper tucked away in my bedroom drawer. One that held power my son never knew I still had. A signature. His signature. Given to me years ago when he needed something. A signature that, in the right hands, could freeze far more than just feelings. I stood up, walked down the hallway, opened the old drawer, and pulled out the folded document. I held it in my hand and whispered to the quiet house. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'm done. He thinks I'm waiting to die. A long breath left my chest. He has no idea what a father can do when pushed too far. And it was exactly 40 minutes later when everything in his life flipped upside down. He never saw it coming. I sat in my car outside the cafe, my hands resting on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of 50 years of fatherhood sitting heavy on my chest. The message kept replaying in my head like an echo I couldn't shut off. When will that old man finally die? My own son. The boy whose hand I once guided across crosswalks. The child I taught to ride a bicycle. The young man I held on graduation day with pride swelling in my chest. He wrote that about me. And he wrote it casually, like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. As I stared ahead, the streetlights blurred into soft halos. My breath fogged the windshield, but I couldn't bring myself to wipe it. I just sat there, letting the realization settle deeper and deeper into me. It wasn't just a message. It was a truth he had been carrying quietly. A truth he never planned for me to see. Maybe he thought I'd be gone soon. Maybe he was waiting for it. Maybe he wanted it. A sharp ache ran through me, but it wasn't physical. It was something worse, something no medicine could fix. It was the sound of my heart cracking, piece by piece, under the pressure of disappointment and disbelief. I told myself to breathe, to stay steady. I reminded myself that I was still the father, his father, and I had a duty to remain calm, no matter how deeply he hurt me. After 10 silent minutes, I finally pushed open the door and stepped outside. The night air was cold, brushing against my face like an unwelcome reminder that the world doesn't pause for heartbreak. I walked slowly toward home, taking the longer route as if I needed the darkness and the empty sidewalks to piece myself together before facing him. The moment I stepped inside, the house felt different. Not physically, everything was exactly where it always was, but emotionally. There was a heavy stillness in it, like the air had absorbed the cruelty of that message. I could almost feel the walls leaning in, listening for what would happen next. I saw him in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a glass of water like it was any other night. He glanced at me, unaware of what I knew. He offered a small nod, casual, distant. That nod alone said so much, how comfortable he felt treating me, as if I were an afterthought in my own home. "Dad, you okay?" "You look pale," he asked, taking a sip. I stared at him longer than I should have, studying him not as my son, but as a man whose soul had drifted somewhere I could no longer reach. His clean-shaven face, once boyish and warm, now looked cold under the kitchen light. His eyes didn't carry a trace of guilt, because why would they? He thought his secret was still safe. I stepped closer, my voice calm, too calm. "I had an interesting evening." He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? You go somewhere?" I didn't answer. I was watching him, waiting for some spark of awareness, some flicker that would tell me he sensed something was wrong. But there was nothing. Just casual indifference. He set the glass down. "Well, I'm gonna head to bed. Long day tomorrow." Bed, sleep, peace, all while I was carrying the weight of his wish for my death. The bitterness rose in me like a tide, but I swallowed it down. A father's anger can either destroy or reshape the future. I chose the second dot as he walked past me. I spoke softly, not loud enough to startle him, but with enough firmness to stop him in his tracks. "Son." He turned slightly, just enough to look back. "Yeah?" I held up my phone. His eyes locked on the screen for a single second, one short, devastating second, and his entire expression shifted. His face drained of color. His mouth tightened. His posture stiffened like he had been frozen mid-step. There it was. The guilt. The fear. The realization. You saw that?" He whispered, his voice cracking around the edges. "I saw everything," I said quietly. His breathing changed, turning shallow and uneven. He opened his mouth, but no excuse came out. What could he say? There was no apology big enough to cover the wound he carved into me with a single careless message. "Dad, I didn't mean." "You meant it enough to type it," I replied. "You meant it enough to send it." He took a step forward, extending his hand toward me like he could pull back the moment, erase it somehow. "Dad, please." It was a joke. A stupid comment. You know how she gets. I was just, "No," I interrupted. "This wasn't a joke. It was the truth you've been holding inside." He looked at the floor, his chest heaving. "Dad, I swear, I don't want you to die. I get stressed, okay? Sometimes things slip out." I studied him carefully, searching his eyes for sincerity. But all I saw was panic that came not from hurting me, but from being caught. That message changed everything, I told him. Everything. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice failed him. He looked smaller now, weaker, like the ground beneath him had shifted. And I realized then that he wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing control, the control he'd held over my home, my wallet, my presence, my patience. "I'm going to bed," I said finally, stepping past him. He didn't follow. He didn't speak. He just stood there in the dimly lit kitchen, frozen, breathless. Unraveling. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know how big that, or how permanent that, and as I closed my bedroom door behind me, I made a silent decision that would change both our lives by morning. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't think straight. The accidental video message my son sent me, "When will that old man finally die?" kept replaying again and again in my head like a broken tape loop. Every word felt like a nail being hammered slowly through my chest. But as painful as that message had been, something else was beginning to overshadow it. Something bigger. Something strange. Because ever since I'd arrived at that unfamiliar mansion, ever since I'd followed the unexpected instructions from that anonymous number, ever since I had stepped foot inside that hidden office, someone had been watching me. I could feel it, from the shadows, from the upper floor balcony, even from behind the closed doors of rooms I didn't dare touch. And now, standing in the hallway, I felt that same heavy sensation again, like a pair of eyes pressing into my back. I turned sharply. Nothing. Just the long, elegant corridor stretching out behind me, lined with antique portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me no matter where I moved. A chandelier above me flickered faintly, swaying as though touched by a breeze that wasn't there. My breath thinned. Get it together, I muttered to myself. You're just tired. But even as I said the words, the air felt colder. I tucked the encrypted file back into my coat pocket and turned toward the end of the hall, where a wide double door stood slightly ajar. A soft light spilled through the narrow opening, warm and golden. Unlike the dim lamps in the rest of the house. My steps slowed. A voice, faint, female, echoed from inside. My son's wife. Her tone was hushed, careful, but urgent. I couldn't make out the words, only the tension. I edged closer. He doesn't know. Not yet, she whispered. A second voice responded, low and steady. A man, not my son. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My body ached, my knees trembled, my chest tightened, not from age but from anticipation. What were they hiding? And why were they hiding it from me? I leaned closer, careful not to make a sound. 40 minutes. Everything changes, the male voice said. 40 minutes. The same time my son had sent me that hateful message. The same moment everything began. My heart pounded, drumming against my ribs. My fingers curled into a fist. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be listening. I knew that. But something inside me, something old, something wounded, something tired of being treated like a disposable burden, kept me rooted to the floor. If they were plotting something, if they were planning to hurt me, if they thought I was too old, or too weak, or too blind to understand what was happening, they were wrong. I took one more step, and the old wooden floorboard beneath my shoe let out a tiny, sharp creak. The voices inside went silent. Completely. Not a breath. Not a whisper. Not a shuffle. Then, the door swung open. I froze. My son's wife stood there. Her eyes widened for a split second. Surprise, fear, guilt. Then she forced a smile so quick it looked painful. Oh, she said softly. I didn't know you were still awake. Behind her, the man she'd been speaking to stepped into the light. A tall, sharply dressed figure, clean-shaven, cold eyes. I recognized him instantly, and my stomach dropped, because he wasn't family. He wasn't a friend. He was my late business partner's son, someone who had every reason to hate my family, and every reason to profit from my downfall. My son's wife placed her hand on my shoulder gently, almost too gently, like she was touching a fragile object she didn't want to break yet. You should go rest, she whispered. Her voice was sweet, syrup sweet, dangerously sweet. Tomorrow is going to be a very big day for you. The man behind her smirked. The doors closed slowly, and I stood alone in the silent hallway. My pulse racing, my mind spiraling, every instinct in my bones screaming the same thing. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were planning something far worse, and I had just walked straight into the middle of it. I didn't sleep at all that night. How could I? My son hated me enough to wish me dead. My son's wife was whispering with a man connected to an old betrayal. And I was trapped inside a mansion filled with secrets that all pointed in one direction. Me. The digital file in my pocket felt heavier than any weight I'd ever carried. The encrypted documents had shocked me, confused me, scared me. But one thing they had given me was purpose. At sunrise, I stood in the center of the mansion's grand foyer, waiting. Waiting for them, waiting for answers. Waiting for the truth about what they had planned. The house was quiet, too quiet, until footsteps echoed down the staircase. Slow, measured, confident. My son's wife descended first. Her expression was calm, too calm. Behind her came the sharply dressed man, hands folded behind his back, a predator who felt no reason to hide his teeth. And last, my son, He looked tired, disheveled, guilty. But when he saw me standing there, waiting, something in his eyes hardened, like he had already chosen a side. "Dad," he said, voice flat, "you shouldn't be up this early." "I didn't sleep," I replied. They exchanged glances. The man stepped forward, fixing his cold stare on me. "You've had a long life," he said. "A successful one. But time catches up to everyone." My son's wife moved to my son's side, touching his arm. "It's better this way," she whispered. "He won't suffer." My blood froze. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were making arrangements, legal, financial, personal. Slow, silent preparations to remove me from the picture entirely. My son looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "You're old," he muttered. "It's time to let go. You've lived enough." Something inside me cracked, not from pain, but from clarity. I reached into my coat pocket. Their eyes followed my hand, instantly expecting medicine, weakness, maybe a weapon in desperation. But what I pulled out was something far more dangerous. My old business partner's master key. A key that unlocked the file. A key that unlocked the truth. And the truth was deadly for them, because my partner hadn't just left behind documents, he left behind instructions. Instructions that stated every asset, every company share, every investment, every inherited property, every limited trust, every hidden interface to the financial empire we built together, would pass not to my son, not to my son's wife, not to anyone in the family, but to me alone, with full power to transfer it at will if I deemed any family member unfit or disloyal. I looked straight at my son. "I saw what you wrote," I said quietly. "That message you sent me by mistake." His face drained of color. His wife stiffened. The man behind them clenched his jaw. I continued, voice steady, stronger than I'd sounded in years. "Everything I own," I said, "everything I've spent a lifetime building, can be taken from you with a single signature." I held up the final document, the transfer order, signed only by me. Waiting for one command. "And last night," I added, "I made a decision." My son stepped forward, panic replacing arrogance. "Dad, please listen." "I didn't mean." "You meant every word," I replied. "And you thought I wouldn't know, wouldn't see, wouldn't understand." I turned to the sharply dressed man. "You thought using my son would help you reclaim your father's half of the empire. You thought I was old, weak, blind." I stepped back, spine straightening, voice rising. "But you miscalculated." I tapped the signature line. "All the accounts you wanted, everything you planned to take, is gone." My son's wife gasped. My son staggered backward, gripping the railing, his breath shattering. "What did you do?" he whispered. I met his eyes. "I revoked you. All of you. The entire fortune is now transferred to a foundation in your grandfather's name. Charity, research, hospitals, orphans, people who actually need it." My son shook his head violently. "No. No, you can't. That was supposed to be mine." He lunged toward me, but the sharply dressed man grabbed his arm, not out of mercy, but out of disgust. "You idiot," he hissed at my son. "You told me he was senile." My son collapsed to the floor, sobbing. His wife backed away, hands shaking. Fear spread across her face like wildfire. And for the first time in years, I felt nothing but peace. I walked toward the front door. As I stepped into the sunlight, I turned back just once. "You wanted me to die," I said quietly. "But instead, I lived long enough to stop all of you." Their faces were pale, shattered, destroyed. I closed the door behind me. And for the first time in decades, I celebrated my freedom.